I've always believed that houses remember. They remember laughter, arguments, goodbyes, and the kind of secrets that sink deep into wood and stay there long after people are gone. And my house, the one sitting at the far end of Willow Creek, remembers more than I ever wanted it to. That summer started like any other. The air was heavy, the cicadas were screaming their lungs out, and my granddaughter Emma came to stay with me for a few weeks. She was 22, too young to understand the weight of silence, and too curious for her own good. "Grandma," she called from the top of the ladder one afternoon, her voice muffled behind a dust mask, "what's this box doing up here all by itself?" I froze halfway up the stairs. There were a dozen boxes in that attic, but that one, the small cedar chest tucked under the slanted beam, wasn't supposed to be touched. "Oh, that old thing," I said lightly. "Just junk from before your mother was born. Leave it be." But Emma had her father's stubborn streak. She never could resist what she wasn't supposed to touch. By the time I reached her, she had the box open. Inside, wrapped in a faded silk scarf, was a bundle of letters tied with twine, and on top of them, in black ink faded with age, was my name. Rosemary Collins, written in a hand I hadn't seen in 50 years. Emma held the first envelope up to the light. "Who's Jonathan Pierce?" she asked. The room felt suddenly smaller. My throat went dry. "He was an old friend," I managed. "Now close it, sweetheart." "Those are just relics." She smiled, that innocent, teasing smile of hers. "You've got a lot of relics, Grandma." That night, after Emma went to bed, I sat by the fireplace with that letter in my lap. The envelope was brittle, the ink bled at the edges, and the faint scent of lavender clung to it, the same perfume my sister Lily used to wear. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. "Dearest Rose, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and so is the truth we buried. You were never meant to carry my part of it, but if the river ever gives her back, they'll come asking questions. And you must stay silent. Tell them it was my fault. Promise me you'll keep it buried. J." I read those lines over and over until they stopped making sense. The river, the truth, Lily. 50 years had passed, and yet I could still hear her voice calling my name that stormy night in 1971, the night she disappeared. When I woke the next morning, Emma was already in the kitchen, the letter spread open on the table beside her cereal bowl. "Grandma," she said slowly, "did Aunt Lily really drown?" My spoon clattered. "Who told you that?" She shrugged. "It's in the town records. Missing presumed drowned, 1971. But you never talk about her, because there's nothing to talk about." I forced a smile. "She left home. That's all." But she didn't look convinced. "Then why did that man write to you about her?" I stared at her, her brown eyes so much like her mother's, searching my face for answers. "Sometimes," I said softly, "love makes people lie." Even to themselves that afternoon, I went up to the attic alone. The smell of dust and old wood pressed down like a memory. I pulled another box toward me, and one marked Winters, 1971. Inside was Lily's old diary. The leather was cracked, the pages yellowed, and when I opened it, a single pressed flower fell out, a white lily, brittle and brown. I turned to the last page. June 19th, 1971. "The storm's coming. Jonathan says it's better if Rose doesn't know. But I can't keep lying to her. If anything happens tonight, please forgive me." A sharp ache bloomed behind my ribs. I closed the book, trembling. She did know something, and she thought I didn't. I pressed the diary to my chest, whispering into the still air. "What did you do, Lily?" That evening, Sheriff Hayes came by. He was older now, slower, but still carried that steady, knowing look. "Evenin', Rose," he said, tipping his hat. "Didn't mean to trouble you, but I thought you should hear it from me." "Hear what?" "They're dredging the river next week, down by the old pier. Found some debris after the last storm. Might stir up some old memories. My heart stuttered. Memories? He nodded. That's where your sister went missing, remember? Thought I'd give you a heads up in case anything turns up. I forced a polite smile, though my hands were shaking behind the door. 50 years, Sheriff. I doubt there's anything left to find. Maybe not, he said. But rivers don't forget, Rose. They just keep what they're given. When he left, I locked the door, leaned against it, and felt my knees give way. The past wasn't done with me yet. That night, I dreamt of the pier. The wind howled. The lantern swung from its hook, light splintering across the black water. Lily's dress clung to her body as she turned toward me, eyes wide, lips trembling. And behind her, Jonathan, his face pale, his hands red. Then the scream, then the splash, then darkness. I woke gasping, the smell of the river in my throat, and that's when I saw it, the letter, open again on my nightstand. I hadn't left it there. Emma? I called into the quiet. No answer. I checked her room, empty. Her phone was gone, so was her jacket, and the attic light was on. The attic light flickered against the ceiling like a heartbeat. Emma? I called again, trying to steady my voice. The stairs groaned under my weight as I climbed, one careful step at a time. The air up there felt different, colder, heavier. Dust floated in the thin beam from the single bulb, and somewhere a moth tapped helplessly against the glass. The box was still open in the corner, the letters scattered like fallen leaves, but Emma was nowhere to be seen. Then I noticed the small window pushed open. Outside, the night was dripping with fog. The moon hung low, a silver coin above the river. A chill ran through me. Downstairs, the phone rang, a shrill, sudden sound that made my heart jump. I hurried down, half expecting it to be her. Emma? I answered breathlessly, but it was Sheriff Hayes. Rose? Sorry to call this late, he said. I just got a report. Someone saw a young woman walking near the old pier about 20 minutes ago. Thought you might know anything about that. The words slammed into me. The pier? My hand tightened around the receiver. That's impossible. She's here. She was just... I looked toward the attic, the open window, the empty room. I'm on my way, I said, before he could answer. The road to the pier hadn't changed in 50 years. Still narrow, still lined with willows that leaned in like they were listening. My headlights cut through the mist, glancing off puddles that shimmered like glass. When I reached the bend, I saw her, Emma's red jacket glowing faintly against the fog. She was standing near the water, her hands folded around something small and pale. I pulled over and stepped out, the cold biting through my sweater. Emma! She turned, startled. Grandma, what are you doing out here? I had to see it, she said quietly. The place where Lily disappeared. I found another letter, tucked inside the diary. It said, "The truth sleeps beneath the pier." I thought it was just a metaphor, but I needed to look. My stomach twisted. Give me that letter. She hesitated, then held it out. The handwriting was the same, Jonathan's. Only this time the paper was damp, the ink blurred, as if it had been touched by water long ago. Rose never knew the whole of it. She saw the blood, but not whose it was. The river will keep my sin until she comes for it herself. Emma's eyes met mine. Grandma, what happened that night? For a long moment, all I heard was the river, the soft lapping, the whisper of reeds. I tried to stop them, I said finally. Lily, she was leaving town with Jonathan. He said he loved her, but I knew he was lying. He wanted her inheritance, our parents' house, the savings, everything. When I confronted him, she defended him. I swallowed hard. There was an argument. He pushed me. Lily tried to pull him away, and then she slipped. The pier rail broke. She fell, Emma's eyes filled. And Jonathan? He jumped in after her. But only one of them came back. I looked down at the river, the same gray current moving like time itself. He told me to say she ran away. Said no one would believe the truth. He made me promise. Emma shook her head. And you kept that secret all these years? Yes, my voice broke, because I thought it would protect us. But secrets, they rot, Emma. They don't protect anyone. A soft rumble echoed upstream, the dredging machines, starting earlier than planned. Their spotlights swept across the water, bright and mechanical, cutting through the fog. Emma stepped closer to the edge. If they're dredging, they'll find her, won't they? Maybe, I whispered. Then we should tell the sheriff before they do. I grabbed her hand. No, let the past stay where it is. She pulled away. That's not what Mom would say. Her words hit like a slap. My daughter, her mother, had spent her whole life resenting me for being distant, for never speaking of Lily. She never knew why. Emma turned and started toward the path. I'm going to haze myself. I watched her walk into the fog, red jacket fading like a dying ember. The next morning, the sheriff knocked on my door again. Rose, he said gravely, we pulled something from the river. I felt the world tilt. What? Did you find? He hesitated. A lockbox, rusted shut, your sister's initials carved on it. My breath caught. We haven't forced it open yet, he said, but there's a note sealed in a jar inside. Looks old. Dated June 19th, 1971. Don't read it, I whispered. He frowned. Why not? Because whatever's in there won't bring her peace. He gave me that steady, quiet look again. Sometimes the truth's the only thing that does. That evening, Emma came home. She looked pale, shaken. They opened the lockbox, she said softly. The note wasn't from Lily. I felt the blood drain from my face. Then from who? She handed me the plastic evidence sleeve. Inside was the fragile paper, the ink brown with age. Rose. I couldn't let her go. She said she was leaving me, and I lost my head. She hit the railing, went under before I could think. I told you it was an accident because I wanted to believe it. If they ever find this, I deserve what comes. I'm sorry. Jonathan. I sank into the chair, the letter shaking in my hands. All those years of guilt, of thinking I was partly to blame, and the monster had confessed long before the river ever spoke. Emma knelt beside me. Grandma, you didn't kill her. No, I whispered, but I buried the truth, and that makes me no less guilty. That night I walked down to the river alone. The fog had lifted and the water glowed under the moonlight. I stood on the repaired pier, feeling the wood creak beneath my feet, and spoke to the dark water below. I kept my promise, Jonathan, I said softly, but not any more. The wind rose, carrying the scent of lilies from somewhere unseen. I'm sorry, Lily. You deserved the truth sooner. Behind me, gravel crunched, Emma's footsteps. You shouldn't be out here, she said gently. I needed to say goodbye. She slipped her arm through mine. Then let's go home. We walked back in silence, the river murmuring behind us. For the first time in 50 years, the house at Willow Creek felt lighter. No more whispering attics, no more unopened boxes, just the quiet hum of peace settling into old walls. I know people will still talk about the Pierce confession, about Lily's story finally ending, but I don't care, because sometimes closure isn't about justice. It's about finally being able to breathe. I still remember the morning after the sheriff left our porch, the way the air smelled like damp wood and something unspoken. My sister Clara didn't say a word through breakfast. She kept glancing at the empty chair near the back door, where Whiskers used to sit every morning, waiting for his share of milk. Mama tried to hum a hymn, but her voice cracked halfway through. It was as if even the walls of our old house knew something was missing. That afternoon I found Clara behind the tool shed, crying into Whiskers' old blanket. I didn't say a word. I just sat beside her, looking at the path that led into the woods, the same one where our little detective adventure had started. Only this time, something darker was waiting on the other side. "Rose," she said quietly, "what if someone took him? Like they did with the other pets?" Her voice trembled, but her eyes, those wide brown eyes, held something fierce. That spark again, the one that told me my little sister wasn't going to let this go. We decided to sneak out that evening, before sunset, when Mama took her afternoon nap. Clara carried her notebook. She said detectives never leave without evidence. And I packed a flashlight and a slice of Mama's apple pie, for courage, I suppose. We followed the same dirt trail past the miller's barn. Only this time, we noticed things we hadn't before: bits of string on the ground, paw prints leading nowhere, and what looked like a small piece of blue ribbon caught on a blackberry bush. "That's Mrs. Turner's dog's collar ribbon," Clara whispered. She was right. I remembered seeing her dog wearing it just days before he disappeared. As we moved deeper into the woods, the light began to thin. Every sound, a snapping twig, a crow's call, even our own breath, felt sharper, louder. I started to wonder if we were being foolish, if maybe this was just a wild goose chase born out of grief. But then Clara froze. She pointed ahead, to a clearing where a wooden shed stood, an unfamiliar one, not old, freshly painted, as if someone didn't want it to look abandoned. "Do you think—" she began. "Shh!" I grabbed her arm. We crept closer, hearts pounding so loud it felt like they might give us away. And then we heard it, a sound so soft we almost missed it. A faint whimper, like a scared animal crying behind those wooden walls. Clara's eyes widened. "That's Whiskers," she whispered. "I know that sound." Before I could stop her, she ran ahead. The shed door was locked, but through the cracks I could see movement, shadows shifting, the glint of small eyes. Not just Whiskers. There were dozens of them, dogs, cats, even a parrot fluttering weakly in a corner cage. And then the crunch of footsteps behind us. "Looking for something, girls?" A deep voice, calm but sharp enough to slice through the air. We turned around. It was Mr. Hargrove, the man who ran the feed store on Maple Street. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You shouldn't be out here," he said, stepping closer, his boots crushing dry leaves underfoot. The same boots that had left prints. Mr. Hargrove stood there with that strange, polite smile, the kind people wear when they're hiding something ugly. His hands were tucked into the pockets of his coat, but I could see the faint outline of a key ring hanging from one side. "Out for an evening stroll?" he asked casually, his tone almost friendly. "Woods aren't safe for little girls after dark." My throat went dry. Clara squeezed my hand so tightly my fingers tingled. I wanted to run. God knows I did. But something inside me refused to move. Maybe it was anger, maybe it was fear, or maybe it was the sight of Whiskers' silhouette behind that wooden wall, pacing, waiting. "We were just heading home," I said, forcing a shaky smile. Mr. Hargrove's gaze dropped to Clara's notebook, the one with the red ribbon tied around it. "That your little diary, sweetheart?" Clara stiffened. "It's my evidence book," she blurted out before I could stop her. He chuckled, a low, slow sound that made my stomach twist. "Evidence?" "My, what big imaginations you two have. Why don't I walk you home? These woods can play tricks on your mind." He took a step forward, then another. Behind him, through the cracks in the shed wall, I saw Whiskers' paw, dirty but alive, press against the gap. My heart clenched. "No, thank you, sir," I said quickly. "Mama's waiting for us." But Clara, bless her stubborn little soul, stepped forward. "You took them, didn't you?" she said, voice trembling but loud enough to echo. "You took Whiskers." And everyone else's pets, too. For a moment, the forest went silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then Mr. Hargrove's expression shifted, the polite mask slipping just enough for us to see the coldness beneath. "You shouldn't make accusations like that, young lady," he said softly. "People might stop believing those sweet smiles of yours." Clara's chin wobbled, but she didn't back down. "We're telling the sheriff." That was when his tone changed, no longer polite. "I don't think you'll be doing that." He lunged forward, just a step, but it was enough to make my heart leap into my throat. I grabbed Clara and ran. We tore through the trees, branches clawing at our sleeves, breath burning in our lungs. I didn't dare look back, but I could hear his footsteps behind us, steady, heavy, too close. "Rose!" Clara cried, stumbling over a root. I caught her arm, pulled her up, and spotted the old Miller fence ahead. We scrambled over it, tearing our skirts, just as a flashlight beam swept the trees behind us. By the time we reached home, we were shaking. Mama was on the porch, worry etched into every line of her face. "Where on God's earth have you two been?" But all I could manage to say between gasps was, "The shed. He's keeping them. Whiskers is alive." Mama's face went pale. She didn't ask questions. She just held us close, whispering prayers under her breath. The next morning, Sheriff Douglas was at our house again. When we told him what happened, he listened carefully, but I could see doubt in his eyes. "Now, girls," he said, "Mr. Hargrove's been in this town 30 years. Runs the only feed store for miles. Are you sure you didn't imagine—" Before he could finish, Clara reached into her pocket and pulled out the blue ribbon we'd found tangled in the bush. "Then explain this," she said fiercely. The sheriff's jaw tightened. He took the ribbon, turned it in his hand, and nodded slowly. "All right, I'll take a look." That night the woods came alive again, only this time it wasn't us sneaking through them. It was Sheriff Douglas and 2 deputies, lanterns glowing like fireflies between the trees. Clara and I watched from our window, hearts pounding. Then we heard it, a sound that made both of us cry at once. A chorus of barks, whimpers, and then faintly, a single familiar meow. Whiskers. I remember that night as clearly as if it were yesterday. The sound of those barking dogs and meowing cats carried through the woods like a haunting symphony, one I can still hear when the wind blows a certain way. Sheriff Douglas came back near dawn, his face grave. His boots were muddy, his hands trembling slightly as he took off his hat. Mama met him at the porch, her voice barely steady. "Did you find them?" she asked. He nodded. "We found the animals," he said quietly. "All of them, alive, and more than I expected. I could tell there was more he wasn't saying." Clara and I stood behind Mama, listening. Sheriff Douglas looked at us, then back at her. "You might want to keep the girls inside for a while." That was when I knew something awful had happened. By midday, word spread through the whole town. They'd found cages, and dozens of them, stacked in that old shed and hidden underground beneath the floorboards. Dogs, cats, even a few missing birds from the mayor's estate. And in the corner, curled up and frightened, but very much alive, Whiskers. Clara cried so hard when she saw her that her knees gave out. She just sat there in the dirt, holding Whiskers against her chest like she'd never let go again. But that joy didn't last long. They found something else down there, something darker, records, ledgers, letters. Mr. Hargrove had been selling the animals, breeding some, trading others to research labs in the next state. To him, they weren't pets. They were profit. When the sheriff confronted him, he didn't deny it. He just said, "Business is business." And that was the last thing he ever said. Because that night, before they could take him to county jail, Mr. Hargrove hanged himself in his cell. Now you might think that was the end of it, that justice had been served and all was right again. But that's the funny thing about small towns, dear. Nothing ever truly ends. It just gets buried under gossip and time. After the papers ran the story, no one talked about Mr. Hargrove anymore. His store was boarded up, his name scraped off the front window. People stopped walking down Maple Street altogether, like the air there had turned sour. But for me, it wasn't over. A week later, I started waking up at night to the sound of scratching, always at the back door. I'd rush down, heart pounding, and find Whiskers sitting there, fur puffed, eyes wide, staring into the woods. One night I followed her gaze, and I saw it, a lantern light flickering between the trees. At first I thought it was my imagination, but then it happened again and again, always around midnight. I told Mama. She said it was just the sheriff doing his rounds, but Sheriff Douglas hadn't been near our house since the investigation ended. And then, one night, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The figure holding that lantern, tall, thin, wearing the same dark coat Mr. Hargrove used to wear. Years passed, but I never forgot that light. Now, at 70, when I sit by my window on quiet nights, I still catch a flicker sometimes. Out there, beyond the trees, near where that shed used to stand before they tore it down, Clara says it's nonsense, just an old woman's mind playing tricks, but deep down I know better. Some things don't die with people. Some guilt lingers, like the smell of rain on rotten wood, and every time I see that lantern glow I wonder, is it Mr. Hargrove's ghost or my own conscience coming back to remind me of the night we uncovered a truth too heavy for two little girls to carry? It was 47 years before I ever set foot in that town again. By then I'd built a new life, a husband, 2 boys, a small flower shop on the corner of Elm and Bridge. I thought I'd left that shadowed childhood behind me, but life has a cruel way of circling back. When Clara passed, God rest her soul, I found among her belongings a small brass key. It was old, with a faded blue ribbon tied to it. The kind of ribbon we used to wear in our hair. There was also a note, in her handwriting, shaky and faint, for the truth we buried. I sat there for a long time staring at that key, the sound of rain tapping against my window. The past has a scent, old paper and damp wood, and that night it filled the room. The next morning I packed my bags and took the first bus back to Maple Hollow. The town had changed, of course. The grocery store was now a coffee shop. The church had new glass windows, but the air, that same stillness hung there like it was waiting. I rented a room at the old Whitmore Inn and decided to visit the property where our house once stood. It was gone now, torn down years ago after a storm, but the land was still there, wild grass, thick trees, and silence. And right at the edge of those woods where that cursed shed had been stood a single new cottage, a neat little thing, white picket fence, rose bushes, smoke curling gently from the chimney. Someone lived there now. I walked closer, the crunch of gravel beneath my shoes loud in the quiet. A woman came out, mid-40s, warm smile, an apron dusted with flour. "Can I help you, ma'am?" she asked. "I used to live here," I told her, "many years ago." Her face softened. "Then you must be one of the Townsend girls," she said. "This place has quite the history." I felt my stomach tighten. "So, you've heard stories?" She nodded, hesitating. "People say this land's haunted, that sometimes at night there's a lantern light that moves through the trees." I tried to laugh, but it caught in my throat. "You've seen it?" "Once," she said quietly, "last winter. Thought it was my husband, but he was asleep beside me. It stopped right at the fence, and then it just disappeared." Her words chilled me. I thanked her politely and turned away, but before I left she said something that made me stop. "You know, I found something here when we bought the place," she said. "An old wooden box buried under the floorboards. I could barely breathe. "May I see it?" She nodded and went inside. A moment later, she returned with a small box. The wood was cracked, the latch rusted. She handed it to me like it was nothing. But I knew that box. I'd seen it before, decades ago, in the sheriff's hands the day they arrested Mr. Hargrove. The brass key in my pocket seemed to grow heavier. I thanked the woman and took the box back to the inn. My hands trembled as I fit the key into the lock. It clicked open easily, like it had been waiting all these years. Inside, there were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to one person, Eleanor Townsend, my mother. Most were from Mr. Hargrove. The earliest dated months before the disappearances began. He wrote about arrangements, deliveries, and compensation, and then one that froze me completely. "The girls are getting suspicious. I've kept my end. I expect yours," I read until the words blurred through tears. Mama had been part of it. It wasn't just Mr. Hargrove. She had helped him, maybe for money, maybe out of desperation. But the truth was worse than any ghost story I'd ever told. I sat there till dawn, letters scattered around me, heart aching in ways I didn't think possible anymore. All those years, Clara and I had thought we'd uncovered evil, when the real betrayal had been sitting at our dinner table. I folded the letters back carefully. My hands shook as I noticed something tucked beneath them, a faded photograph. Mama and Mr. Hargrove, standing by the shed, smiling, and in the background, a lantern. That morning I went back to the woods one last time. The air was cool, the grass wet with dew. I stood where the shed once stood, clutching that photo. "I know what you did," I whispered into the trees. "Both of you." The wind stirred, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and rain. For a moment I thought I saw a flicker, a soft golden light weaving through the trees. Only this time it didn't scare me. It felt like forgiveness, or maybe just the truth, finally setting itself free. I didn't sleep that night. The box sat on the dresser beside the bed, its shadow stretching long and crooked under the lamplight. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mama's face, the same soft smile she used to wear when she brushed my hair, humming quietly as if the world outside our window wasn't full of secrets. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I called the local paper the Maple Hollow Chronicle, the same one that had printed the story all those years ago. The editor was a young man named Daniel Price. His voice carried that polite curiosity journalists always have when they smell something old and scandalous. I told him who I was. There was a pause on the line. "Mrs. Rose Townsend?" he asked. "The little girl from the Hargrove case?" "Yes," I said softly. "But I'm not calling about him. I'm calling about my mother." When Daniel arrived that afternoon, he brought a small recorder and a notebook. He looked barely 30, with kind eyes and that restless energy only youth can have. He sat across from me, notebook ready. "You said you found something." I handed him the box. He flipped through the letters slowly, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. "These are real," he murmured. "This changes everything we thought we knew." I nodded. "My sister and I thought we uncovered a monster. Turns out we just peeled back one layer of a lie that went much deeper." Daniel glanced up. "Do you want this published?" That question hung heavy in the air. I looked out the window at the fading light spilling across the hills. The town was quiet, as it always had been. People had built new homes, raised new families, all on ground watered with secrets. "I want the truth to rest," I said finally. "Not to hurt anyone, but to let the ghosts sleep." He seemed to understand. "I can write it respectfully," he said. "Tell it like history, not scandal." I smiled faintly. "History has a way of turning scandalous all on its own, son." After he left, I sat alone for hours thinking of Clara. She'd carried that key all her life. She'd known, maybe not everything, but enough. That was why she'd left me the note, for the truth we buried. It wasn't just a reminder. It was her way of asking me to finish what we started. And so I did. That week, Daniel's article came out. It didn't make front-page headlines, but it stirred something in Maple Hollow. The town murmured again, like it used to when we were children. Old names were whispered. People came to my in-room, some curious, some angry, some just wanting to know why. I answered what I could, and for the first time in decades I felt lighter. Then one evening, just before I was set to leave town, a letter arrived at my door, no return address. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Mrs. Townsend, my grandmother worked for your mother in the old days. She once told me she saw your sister Clara at the shed that night, not by accident. She said Clara helped your mother move the boxes, thought you should know. A friend. The room tilted. Clara? I read it again and again. Each time my hands trembled harder. Could it be true? Had Clara known more than she ever told me? Had she been part of it? Or was she just protecting me from a truth too heavy for both of us? I'll never know. Some things die with people, no matter how much you dig. That night I walked down to the river, the same one that ran behind our childhood home. The air was crisp, the moon high. I carried the box, the letters, and that photograph. I stood by the edge, the water glinting like silver glass. For Mama, I whispered. For Clara. For Whiskers. For all the things we didn't understand. Then I dropped the box in. It sank slowly, bubbles rising to the surface, until the water swallowed it whole. The ripples spread wide, then quieted, as if the river itself sighed. I stood there a long while, the sound of crickets echoing around me. Then I saw it, that faint lantern light, glowing far across the trees. For the first time, I didn't look away. "Good night," I said softly, and this time the light went out for good. When people ask me why I tell these stories, I say it's not about ghosts. It's about memory, the kind that lingers even when everyone else has forgotten. Some truths don't haunt you to scare you. They haunt you to remind you that you survived. I read that. I didn't write back, but if I had, I'd have said this. No, Daniel. That isn't a lantern. It's just the truth. Finally learning how to float. I'm an old woman now. My hands shake, my knees ache, but my heart feels lighter than it has in decades. When I sit by my porch in the evenings, I sometimes talk to Clara, out loud, like she's sitting right beside me. I tell her the garden's blooming again, and that Whiskers would have loved the new kittens the neighbor's boy brings over. I tell her that people finally stopped whispering our names like a secret, and I tell her I'm ready to rest. Because the past isn't a monster, you see. It's just a story that needs to be told until it stops hurting. And tonight, as I close this chapter for good, I see that same soft flicker out there beyond the trees. Not haunting me, not warning me, just keeping me company like an old friend who stayed till the end. This was Mrs. Rose, and that was the story of the letter that shouldn't have been found.